As promised, we are joined by, honestly, not only a good friend of mine, but one of the best in the business. I wish every team had a Fran Duffy. You can check him out on social media at EaglesXOs. He is as good as anybody I know at breaking down the tape and actually shows his work, shows the video on the Eagles' awesome YouTube page, on his social media. It is invaluable for me as a guy that does the Eagles pregame show and a bunch of stuff in Philadelphia market during the week. I could not live without Fran. Fran, you take me back to like high school and college where like I would go and like I'd see these smart kids in class. I'd be like, hey, Jenny, can I borrow your notes? Can I borrow your notes? And they would let me borrow their notes, and I'd be able, I'm not going to do as well as Jenny. I'm not going to get an A or an A plus, but if I just read Jenny's notes, I can get an A minus. You are my modern day Jenny, Fran. You're the person that does all the work so that I can get the Cliff Notes version by watching all your clips, reading all your stuff, and then feel pretty knowledgeable about it. I hope that makes you feel good. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like, Jenny is like one of my least favorite characters in cinema if we're talking like Forrest Gump. But I think when you look at you were surrounded by a lot of quality students at the Princeton University, so to be included in that group is definitely a compliment.
No, in all sincerity, Fran, the videos are amazing. I think every team should have a guy. Do you know offhand, Fran, how many teams have a Fran Duffy type? And what I mean by that is someone that is basically kind of like a Greg Cosell, an in-house Greg Cosell breaking down the video, but then it's almost like your video clips, Fran, it's like your own personal NFL matchup show. It's like your own personal Eagles matchup show.
Yeah, and it's awesome. That's one of the things that I was really blessed with early when I first started here, and this was my 12th season with the Eagles full time, and so they really allowed me to kind of carve out my niche and find a role, and certainly that has been with X's and O's content, and there aren't a lot of people in this role around the other 31 teams, but I was very blessed a long time ago to be given that niche to be able to carve this out, and it's worked out since then. We've been doing now 12 years of Eagles game plan, which is basically an Eagles version of NFL matchup, and focusing in on the opponent each and every week. It's been a lot of fun, and we learned a lot of football along the way.
Yeah, you absolutely need to check out Eagles Game Plan as well as the Eagles Eye in the Sky podcast and the Journey to the Draft podcast. All absolutely excellent. One of the things I want to start with, Fran, is something that Greg actually talked about last week here on the Ross Tucker Football podcast, and it's just the multiplicity of the Eagles offense. You've done a really good job of showcasing this in some of your videos. Just the bind that the Eagles are able to put defenders in. When I watch those videos, or I watch the Eagles at times, Fran, I really don't know what the backside off the ball linebacker is supposed to do. I mean, they're really putting him in a position, correct me if I'm wrong, where he almost can't be right. Can you kind of verbalize that for people that haven't had a chance to watch your videos?
Yeah, I guess that would be the thing from a schematic element that the Eagles do really, really well. And we all hear the term RPO, RPO, RPO. And the Eagles certainly run a lot of RPOs. They were in the top 5 this year in terms of how often they like to run these run-pass option plays. And it's been a really effective tool for them, especially when they get into the red zone. They have been lethal against teams using the RPO when they get inside the 20, 25, 30-yard line. And that's because what they do is they make you cover every single blade of grass from sideline to sideline. And I'm sure I didn't actually catch Greg from last week, but I'm sure one of the things he talked about was some of the plays we saw in that NFC title game against the 49ers, where essentially you take one of the best defenses in football and certainly one of the best back sevens in football when you look at the impact Fred Warner can have on a defense. I think when you look at the way that the Eagles operate, it's like, okay, well, there are three threats on any of these RPO calls. You either have the handoff to the back, and we know the Eagles are dominant at the point of attack from an offensive line standpoint. Miles Sanders is explosive. Kenny Gainwell has been their leading rusher each of the last two games here in the postseason. And then Boston Scott always seems to find his way to the end zone. But that offensive line is just so dominant at the point of attack. So we say, okay, you've got the threat of just the basic run game. Then you've got Jalen Hurts, the ability to keep the ball and win on the backside. But then you also have to respect whatever pass option they have on the backside of that play. So maybe it's a slant to A.J. Brown. In that game against San Francisco, it was the bubble screen to Dallas Goedert. It might be a fade ball to Devontae Smith. But whatever that route is on the backside, you've got to account for that as well. And so schematically, from a pure X's and O's standpoint, there are three different options that you have to make sure that you account for. And if you are one of those guys that's kind of caught in that bind, are you going to cover A or are you going to cover B? If you cover a B, all right, well, we're happy to go to the other side, and we're going to go to wherever you don't have the numbers. And so that's been one thing that has really stood out just watching this team week in and week out this season. But then, Ross, it's not just the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes with this as well, right? Because when you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert just as pass-catching weapons, well, now wherever you're leaking, wherever you're lacking defensively, that's where we're going to go over and over and over again. And I think that's where you start leaning into Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen, the game planners, the architects of this offense, and say, you know what? We are willing to spam the same plays over and over and over. We're going to keep running it until you stop it. And that's something I think we'll see here in this football game on Sunday.
Totally agree, and I love that they do that. Fran, when they just start running inside zone play after play after play, and they're knocking the other team back, I love it. I mean, I thought actually in the Niners game that they probably could have run it even more. They elected on some opportunities to try to take those shots down the field with some of the go routes on the sideline, and I give the Niners corners credit. They defended those plays well. Otherwise, the game could have gotten out of hand even more. But they were running it so, I mean, weren't the Niners like the number one run defense? And some of those holes, now early in the game, it was interesting. Early in the game, the Niners were running it down. They were doing a pretty good job. But as the game wore on, boy, they were just pounding them.
And that's the thing, is you started getting into some things formationally that the Eagles were doing to try and get the numbers to their side on the play side of those runs, where, you know, maybe you're putting three receivers to the boundary and trying to get some of those second and third level defenders away from the direction of the run. And that's where the chess match kind of went back and forth there between the Eagles offense and the 49ers defense. But again, that's what, you know, I think ultimately when you look at, you know, essentially option football in college, it can be a great equalizer, right? That's why you see Army and Navy and the service academies run a lot of option football, because it can be a great way to raise the floor of your offense and match up against a more talented defense. But when you do that with A-plus talent, which the Eagles have both in the trenches and from a skill position standpoint, well, now you're cooking with gas, and it's just tough to stop. And it's been a huge challenge. Whenever Jalen Hurts has been healthy, you know, that's what makes this matchup against Kansas City so fun. These have been the two most dominant offenses. Whenever their starting quarterbacks are in, these two offenses have been better than anybody in the NFL, and that's a big reason why when you look at the way that the Eagles play schematically.
Fran, you mentioned you've been doing this for 12 years. The Eagles coordinators are pretty darn good, aren't they? I mean, there's a reason why they're getting these head coaching interviews. They've been pretty impressive. Young guys that, to be honest, I didn't know that much about until they got these jobs. But Sirianni did a heck of a job picking Steichen and Gannon.
Yeah, a lot of credit to those guys and the assistants as well, Ross. I think when you look at a lot of these, a lot of the players here on this Eagles roster, both offensively and defensively, a lot of these guys are playing the best football of their career. And so you give a lot of credit not just to the scheme and the game plans on a weekly basis and the execution, but then also just what they put in during the week of practice, what they've done in the offseason. And you look at linebackers coach Nick Rallis and offensive line coach Jeff Stoutland and running back coach Jamal Singleton and defensive backs coach Denard Wilson, right? All of these guys have done such a great job of being able to connect with these players, realize, hey, this is what this guy does well, or this is what this guy doesn't do as well. We're not going to ask him to do the latter. We're going to lean hard into the former. And then obviously the connection part of being able to get on the same page with these guys on a personal level, that shows up time and time and time again when you see a lot of these sideline interactions. We post a lot of access content to our YouTube page that you mentioned earlier, and it's like you see those interactions on a weekly basis, and it's easy to see why this team is as tight knit as they are.
Okay, let's talk about when the Eagles have the ball.
Yeah.
How do you think the Chiefs are going to defend them? I mean, I know you've studied a lot. You've watched a lot of Steve Spagnuolo.
Yep.
You know what the Chiefs like to do. I actually talked about this a little bit earlier in the week with Brett Coleman, who does a good job breaking down video as well. Your thoughts on what the options are for Spags and what you think he might end up doing?
Well, I think it's interesting to kind of differentiate the identity of a Steve Spagnuolo defense this year versus what we've seen traditionally in Kansas City, where it's been much more man coverage and much more blitz in years past. Now, this year, they've got a bunch of young guys on the back end. There was a lot of turnover in that secondary. And, part of that, I would think that that's a big reason why we're seeing less blitz and less man coverage is now you're seeing a lot more umbrella zone, a lot more split safety defense, and a little bit less blitzing. Now, I would expect that will carry over into this game. That said, one theme that we've seen really on a weekly basis here this year is that teams are going to blitz at a little bit more of a higher clip against this Eagles offense than what they typically do. So I do think you're going to see some unique blitzes there from Steve Spagnuolo. I just don't think it's going to be to the level that we've seen from him in years past. And so, and look, playing man coverage against this Eagles offense, that's risky business. You go back, you watch that game on prime time, Sunday Night Football, Eagles-Packers, what was it, week 10, week 11, Ross? That's the way that they wanted to live. He said, you know what? We're going to get into sub-package. We're going to get into our dime defense. We're going to play man-to-man coverage, and we're going to heat up Jalen Hurts, and we're going to make him beat us. Well, he ran for almost 200 yards as an individual in that game. He ran for over 120 in the first half. And so I think when you look at Jalen Hurts, anytime that you're going to try and see if you can send extra pressure at him, he's got the ability to beat you with his legs. But then also, especially in the second half of the season, he has shown a lot more willingness to cut it loose down the field and say, hey, you know what? If you're going to try and send more bodies at me, you better make sure you cover Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, because nobody has more yards this year on go balls than A.J. Brown. And Devontae Smith is not far behind him. So I think when you look at their willingness to attack downfield against the blitz, that could be an X factor in this game if Steve Spagnuolo decides he's going to turn the heat up on Jalen Hurts.
So the next question is, why is the blitzing, why is Jalen Hurts running so effective against the blitz?
Well, I think it's kind of twofold. It depends on if it's going to be man coverage behind those blitzes or if it's going to be zone. And I think you'll see probably a mix here in this game. We've seen Kansas City at times this year use a spy, and that's why going back and watching. All right, well, how do they defend some or more of their athletic quarterbacks on the schedule? And we've seen them go conservative and go kind of like 3-man mush rush with Chris Jones as a contained player outside and rely on those guys to be able to win up front with an athletic linebacker like a Willie Gay as the spy. And then you've got a lot of bodies in coverage. Would not shock me at all if that's what we see the majority of third downs in this game. But at times, I do think you'll see some extra pressure. I think you'll see Trent McDuffie. You think you'll see Nick Bolton, right? You'll see those guys coming from the second and third level to get after Jalen Hurts. And if they're playing with zone coverage behind it, I think that's where now, if you're Jalen Hurts, you've got to be able to win with your arm. And we've seen this year that he has shown the ability and improved ability, by the way, to be able to do that. He was not doing it at a super high rate last year in 2021. This year has gotten better. And look, the first half of the year, a lot of those answers included the screen game. And that was a lot of Jalen's work, right? A pre-snap. Hey, you know what? It's going to be a blitz. It's going to be coming from the left side. Let's throw a screen into this and throw it to where the defenders aren't, right? And that was a very successful tool for them in the first half. But there was a change where I kind of noticed that line of demarcation for me was at the bye week. It was a week 8 bye week. They came out in week 9 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it was bombs away downfield. And you look at the games after that, a lot of the answers against the blitz were some more of those vertical passes, and they love those empty sets, Ross. If they feel like it's going to be a pressure situation on third down, well, let's go into empty, because now we are making the defense declare. If the offense is completely spread out and Jalen Hurts is in the shotgun by himself in the backfield, as a defense, trying to disguise anything is a moot point, because the ball's going to be out too fast for that disguise to be able to work. And so that's been also a really good tool for the Eagles to just kind of inject some truth serum into the defense. That's something we could see in this game on Sunday too.
All right, so then on the other side, what will you be looking at when the Chiefs have the ball? What's the key there in your mind?
Well, trying to stop Patrick Mahomes is like a futile thing, right? I don't know that you're going to look at that and say, okay, this is going to be the antidote to trying to stop number 15. I think at the end of the day, you understand he's one of the best players in the league for in recent memory and really moving forward. I mean, this guy's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer when it's all said and done. So I think ultimately it's going to be about trying to limit the production, limit the explosive plays, and get off the field on third down. And when they go to third down, we know that it's all about trying to get number 87 the football, Travis Kelce. And so what their plan is for Travis Kelce will be very, very important. And to me, in this game, I think this is going to be one of those that's going to go back and forth, and it's going to be all about the money downs and those high leverage situations, red zone and third down. Can the Eagles get off the field? The Chiefs' red zone offense has been outstanding. The Chiefs' red zone defense, not as much. They've been on the opposite end of it. So if the Eagles can get a stop or two in the red zone in this game, force some field goals instead of touchdowns, and then conversely do that on the opposite side, that's something that will go a long way here in this game, trading 7 points for 3. And a big part of that, obviously, again, is stopping Travis Kelce. We'll get a better sense of the health of the rest of the receivers as the week progresses. We don't know at this point what it looks like for Kadarius Toney. It looks like no Mecole Hardman. Juju Smith-Schuster's a little banged up, but it looks like he's going to go. I think if you were able to go into this game with no Mecole Hardman and potentially no Kadarius Toney, that takes a lot of those big motion players, the eye candy players, out of that offense for Kansas City, and that would be a big boost here for this Eagles defense as well. But you and I both know that pass rush is that's the X factor here in this game for the Eagles defense.
Fran, I can't believe the numbers Mahomes put up this year without Tyreek Hill.
It's crazy.
I mean, for him to be able to change his game the way, I mean, that's the part that's most impressive to me. I guess the Eagles have to take away the initial throws, right? They got to take away the quick throws. I'm guessing they want Mahomes to hold on to the ball and move around a little bit, give the pass rush a chance to get there.
And that's the thing, is that when, it's not that his numbers drop like big time when that happens, but that creates the best way for you to succeed, is like create a little bit of chaos in the backfield, force him off of his first read. And honestly, I think that's been something that the Eagles defense has done really well over the course of this year. I think a lot of people will look at the 70 sacks in the regular season and say, D-line, and they're not wrong. The defensive line is really, really good. It's a strength of this team, but you got to give a lot of love to the back seven as well, and some of the schemes that they've employed on the back end, some of the tools that they've used, dropping defense of those edge rushers into the flats to try and take away some of those first throws. I can think back to a sack against the Indianapolis Colts on third down where Matt Ryan drops back to pass, but Brandon Graham is there in the passing lane, and now you've got time for, I think it was Josh Sweat or Javon Hargrave to get home for a sack, right? When you have those kinds of plays, and you're going to change them series to series. You're going to change them week to week. But whether it's an edge rusher dropping out, a bracket coverage in the middle of the field, a safety being lining up where you didn't expect them to, maybe you're playing some sort of basic coverage that you weren't expecting. Whatever it is, just trying to get that quarterback off his first read, force him to hold the football, then let your guys up front be able to get home. I think that would be an area where you say, okay, that's a winning formula for the Eagles in this game. But Patrick Mahomes, he can create in any situation and create explosive plays in any situation. And so you got to be buttoned up from snap to whistle.
Make sure you check out this guy on social media at EaglesXOs. His content will be fantastic. If you're an Eagles fan, it's mandatory. If you're just really into the Super Bowl, you're really into football, you have to check out Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, the Journey to the Draft podcast, which I'm on a lot and really enjoy. Obviously, a lot of you remember Fran from his college draft days as well. Eagles game plan, showing the X's and O's preview of the game for those of you, obviously, in the Philadelphia area this weekend will be fantastic. Fran, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Ross, appreciate it as always, man. I'll talk to you soon.